Hello, beautiful souls. This is our first pick a card reading of the year. Happy New Year. We are taking a look today at where are you being too hard on yourself? I wanted to do this reading because whenever we finish up one year and we enter the next one, along come New Year's resolutions, along comes a lot of expectations, and we start measuring ourselves. We measure ourselves up against our past self, our future self that lives in our mind. We measure ourselves up against other people. There's so much measuring happening. And so I want to take a moment to see where can we actively be kinder to ourselves while we engage in that kind of behavior. So we are taking a look at where are you being too hard on yourself. I'll go a little bit more into detail, well, a lot more into detail in your reading. So for right now, just take a moment and see which pile, which group calls you the most. I have selected some feathers. I've pulled just an advice card so far. Everything else we will be pulling in the reading. And let me give you a close-up of these feathers and the colors that I have chosen. Look at this first one. It's so fun. All of these feathers are peacock feathers, by the way. So this one is a super light and fluffy gray one. Let's focus on it there. I wish you could feel how soft it is. The kind that really keeps the birds warm. So that is group number 1. Your color card. It just stands out to me. Ooh, I just saw a yellow butterfly outside, by the way. There's a number 33 up here. The color card is Ripe Peach, Georgia Peach, and Time for Orange. So that's group 1. And then group 2. I choose these cards in the way that I lay out the feathers intuitively, but I loved how this feather has green and like a bluish tint in its tips, and it just seemed to match so nicely with this green, which is hemlock green, dark stormy sky green, and deepest woodland green. Up here it says B13. Look at how gorgeous this feather is. So that is group 2. I'm really taking my time with these today, but they're just so cute. And then group number 3, this feather also very fluffy towards the inside, if one can call it that. And then at the end, the tips are very blue, and in the middle it's a little green. And the colors along with this are Fresh Hyacinth, Rosalind's Periwinkle Blue, Blue Phlox, and V28 is the number up here. Okay, that is group 3. So go ahead and take a moment to see which group calls you the most, and then I will meet you at your reading. The timestamps are in the description below as always. And before I let you focus on that fully, let me just remind you the only way to book a personal reading with me is through my website. I will never contact you via Instagram DMs or comments on TikTok or comments here on YouTube. Please don't get scammed, but if you would like a personal reading with me, I am more than happy to do so if you book through my website. Okay, now I will be quiet and you can take a moment to zone out. Hi group 1, this is your reading if you chose this super fluffy gray feather. And it's funny because it is very gray, but having it along with these like orange tones actually makes it look a little bit orange as well. We're going to set this over here. the feather up here, just so you know you're in the right reading. And then we are going to get right into it. So I like to just jump into group one. If you've watched a few where you have chosen group one, you will know this. You are the group where we figure things out. How are we going to structure this reading? Because I do these readings completely intuitively. I don't like to structure them too far ahead. So we're going to take a look at where are you being too hard on yourself. I'm going to want, I think I'm going to just go with the classic. Okay, let's pull some tarot cards. We're going to hold off on this. Okay, look, I actually pulled two for you. Don't rat me out to the other groups because you're actually the only group that got two advice cards. We're going to take a look at tarot first. For group one, where are they being too hard on themselves? We have the Strength card. We have the King of Wands. Oh, I'm immediately getting a strong sense of expectations. So, a strong sense of, you know what I'm getting is the, first off, I'm getting something about posture. Definitely something about posture, but I'm getting the sense of you really pushing something. Pushing to fit. Pushing to grow straight. And I'm thinking straight as in like the way this staff is very straight, but take it as it resonates because it may have to do with you trying to fit into a conformity when it comes to sexual expression or when it comes to your gender. That's a possibility, but don't overthink it if that doesn't apply. Because mainly what I'm seeing is a real... It's interesting because I feel like you're trying to fit into a mold, and by doing that, there's actually a lot of rigidity that you're experiencing. Like you're not experiencing like some kind of full range of experience, not some kind of full range of motion, because you're trying to line up with... I'm thinking of, for example, in yoga, when you focus too much on getting the exact pose because you want your pose to look like what it looks like on either the screen that you're watching or the book that you're reading, you know, like whichever way you practice or you're learning yoga. There's something about trying to make your pose look just like what you're seeing without appreciating actually the experience of the movement and the experience of your body actually not... Like there's something about not actually not fully feeling the experience of what you're actually trying to fit into. Yeah, oh my goodness. You're very hard on yourself. You have very clear expectations. Yeah, nothing else will do. Very, very like focused on fitting into something. And because of that, you're actually kind of dimming something that is really powerful about you. And that is, I think, partially the fact that even though you are putting yourself in such a small lane or such a small box, you're still growing regardless. There's this image that was going around a couple months ago of somebody came across a tree that was growing through the metal pole of a stop sign, and it like grew its way through. That's exactly what I was seeing from the get-go, from the moment this card came out. It grew through this metal pole against all odds, and still had like, wherever it could, it came out and flowered a little bit. And that's what I'm getting. It's like, even though you're very much like, you're applying a lot of pressure, which is probably pressure that you were conditioned into, but still, you're still choosing to also apply that pressure. And despite that, there's something that is like a light, a fire, something that won't go out. I think there's also a very strong, there's a strong control of your negative emotions. Like you kind of just want to focus on positive emotions, but therefore you don't let yourself feel through the negative emotions completely. And you try to rationalize the negative emotions. But by doing so, you're enforcing such a strict, I just heard curriculum, not sure why, but you're enforcing such a strict measurement that it also dampens your positive emotions. So it's like putting a like a damper, some kind of like putting something on all emotions, because you're afraid of having to deal with negative emotions. But then therefore you're not experiencing the full spectrum. And I have to say, with the words that are coming out, like spectrum and stuff like that, I do feel there is definitely, again, if you're not questioning at all, then leave it on the table for someone else to take. But I do see someone here that is trying to fit into either a gender norm or a norm around sexuality, like really trying to make it fit. And because of that, they're not able to really enjoy themselves as much as you should. And there's also a part of you that is very much like proud of the fact that you're able to suppress something so well. Like, you're really good at suppressing it, but that pride is kind of misaligned, because it's like you should be more proud. And again, the word pride. You should be more proud to actually express whatever it is that you're suppressing. Yeah, look at that. Yeah, that's exactly what I was just saying. The Six of Wands with the King of Wands is very much like you actually being like, oh, I'm successfully suppressing this. And again, this is very much like you successfully suppressing any kind of negative emotion. So emotions around loss, possibly grief. You're like, yeah, I'm doing a good job because I'm suppressing this. And yet, I just heard what comes around goes around. Goes around. Yeah. I'm like, did I mix it up? Is it what goes around comes around? Doesn't matter, right? It's going to come around. And that's what this Justice card is telling us. I'm also getting this sense of like, again, this feeling of like suppressing something is almost giving me this imagery, not almost, it is giving me this imagery of like trying to pop a pimple. My goodness. I don't know why I was stuttering there, but it's like the imagery of trying to pop a pimple and thinking like, oh yeah, I managed this, you know, and then it completely gets infected, and it's like, no, you actually just made it worse. There's something that you think you've managed and you've like handled it. You're like, I handled this. And Spirit is saying like, no, you actually haven't. This is not resolved. You just kind of did your thing and walked away. Where can you be kinder to yourself? There's definitely some inner child healing that wants to be done with the Six of Cups at the bottom of the deck. Let's roll some dice. We have the third house. Let's put these up here. We have Cancer. And we have the Sun. Absolutely. You are, so the third house is the house of communication. It is our direct environment, like our neighborhood and such. But it is also how we think, how we process our direct environment. And so it's a mercurial house. It is very much how are you processing, and what are we processing? Cancer, emotions, ruled by the moon. And especially with a Cancer vibe here, it's very much like that hard shell, soft inside, right? It's this hard front. And with the Sun, it's like choosing, especially because these are like the Sun and the moon, very, very opposite areas of focus. And so there is a very much like a it seems like there is definitely like a refusal to look at the darker emotions that we all have to face at some point or another. And so where are we being too hard on ourselves? Group one, I think that you possibly, and this is going to sound so silly, but I think if it feels like you take offense to negative emotions, or like you take them personal, like you somehow, when you experience negative emotions, I think it might have an effect on you that makes you feel like you're doing something wrong, or like you're failing, because otherwise you wouldn't be experiencing negative emotions, which that is not accurate, because we all experience the entire spectrum of emotions throughout our lifetime. And so sometimes you're going to feel ecstatic, and sometimes you're going to feel depleted. Sometimes you're going to feel completely drained, and sometimes you're going to feel absolutely energetic. And that's totally normal. And so you don't have to force yourself to not even, oh, you know what? Didn't I say buffer earlier? Like damp. This almost like these small feathers feel like they would be a really good buffer, right? This is also, like I said, these are the in-between feathers that keep the birds warm. And there comes a time throughout the year where the birds molt and they take these out. They lose them and they take them out. And so there's something where you are telling yourself, I'm being really strong, but you're actually so overprotective of your emotion that you don't let anything through. And that's where you're being too hard on yourself, because you are absolutely very strong and very capable of handling whatever it is that comes your way. And so you have to trust that it's okay to go through your emotions. This very much gives me the feeling of when a child falls down and scrapes its knee, and the parent is like, don't cry, you're fine, don't cry. And internalizing that and feeling like, no, I can't cry when I experience pain, because A, it might inconvenience other people, and B, like, I need to be strong. what we want to do is tell our inner child that I fell, I scraped my knee, and it's okay to cry because my body is experiencing something that is painful, that is shocking, and it wants to process that. It is okay to let that out because otherwise we just hold it in and it festers. Let's take a look at your advice card. I don't want to make these too long, but I do kind of want, yeah, let's take a look at your advice card. Interesting. Your advice is I honor virtue and I give offerings that are genuine. I think your advice, I honor virtue. I think your advice card is a reminder to these expectations that you have on yourself. We're talking a lot about yourself, right? But it's also asking you to honor in yourself as well as others when people are trying, when people are making an honest effort, especially an honest effort. Because of this, I give offerings that are genuine. And this is, let's take it back to you. This is about where are you being too hard on yourself and how can you be kinder to yourself? So I want you to honor your strength, but I also want you to honor your vulnerability and to give offerings to both sides, especially with this justice card, right? There is a balance that needs to be created here where it's like you cannot just appreciate and honor yourself when you are doing well or when you are in positive emotions or emotions that excite you. There's something where you have to also honor yourself and especially your inner child, because there's a part of you that is being left behind. There's a part of you that's being suppressed and being left behind. And Spirit is asking you to invite that back into, invite it back to the table. And for some reason I'm seeing the movie Inside Out. I don't know when I've seen that last, but the different emotions are all sitting at this console, right? And they're all consulting with each other. They're all deciding together, okay, how do we proceed? How do we interact? That's kind of the imagery that I'm getting, is that everybody deserves a seat at the table within your spectrum of emotions or your spectrum of expression, no matter which kind of expression we're talking about, whether that is gender or sexuality or any kind, race. There's something, there's a part of you that you're really pushing down because it doesn't fit wherever it is that you've been trying to fit into. And so Spirit is asking you to honor that part of yourself because it hasn't done anything wrong. Let's pull an archetype card. For group 1. Oh, yeah. We have child wounded. Okay, so there is a light attribute and then there's a shadow attribute. So let's start with the shadow, because this is where are we being too hard on ourselves, right? So we want to address the negative first and then we'll address the positive, the room for improvement. So the shadow attribute is blames all dysfunctional relationships on childhood wounds, resists moving on through forgiveness. So we're keeping this very much focused on ourselves. This wounded child archetype is telling me that at some point, and this we had already talked about this with the Six of Cups, at some point you were told that you don't fit in, and you started blaming yourself because obviously there must be something wrong if you don't fit in, right? And so although this says blames all dysfunctional relationships on childhood wounds, I think this is more so like blames that you were in an energy, or possibly sometimes are in an energy, where you tend to blame things on the fact that you don't quite fit in, that there's something other about you. Let's take a look at the light attribute. Awakens compassion and desire to serve other wounded children, opens the learning path of forgiveness. Along with this, I give offerings that are genuine. Spirit wants you to really spend some time with yourself and be so kind and be so nurturing, especially nurturing, and give yourself avenues of expressing things that you haven't been expressing. They want you to open up a pathway of compassion to your inner child where you get to do things and make things just for the heck of it, just for the experience of it, not because it makes you fit in, not because it is productive, it will be productive for you, but there's something about like you having the sense of like, oh, I need to be productive in a way that makes me like, there's like this feeling of like I need to be a cog in the machine, and it's like, no, you really don't. You're here to experience. And at the same time, all this energy that is like the Strength card and the King of Wands, this energy that is very much ambitious and very driven, you're just directing it at yourself with a negative attitude. If you direct it outward into the world with a positive attitude, it's gonna like drive you so much faster towards wherever it is you're trying to go. Let me pull another oracle card. So overall, I feel like, where are you being too hard on yourself? You're really just trying to fit in to some kind of space that you think you have to make work, and it's like you really don't. Whoop. We have the Snake. The Snake is asking you to shed that skin that doesn't fit anymore. Imagine if the snake were to never shed, but it keeps growing. That would be so painful. And that's exactly what I think you're experiencing. There's something where it's like you're restricting yourself in your experience. Okay. Let's get one of these. We have Space Out. One's destination is never a place, but always a new way of seeing things. I love that. One's destination is never a place. And I do think once you change your perspective on like being kinder to yourself in terms of like not making yourself fit in, it will be like you'll get to a point where at first it's uncomfortable. The snake, as it's shedding, right, is like vulnerable and is like, what the heck is going on, probably for the first few times. Probably feels like a process of dying almost. But then ultimately, once you get used to it, it's like, once you have that new perspective, it's like, why did I wait so long to let go of that expectation? Why did I wait so long? Why did I hold on to that for so long? And then when that happens, be kind to yourself as well, because you held on to it for so long for a reason. Don't just don't just redirect those expectations in yourself in another way. Like, that's kind of like, you know, don't, I'm trying to find, they're giving me an image and words, but I'm trying to find a way to say it less offensive. Oh my God, I just have to make it work somehow. Don't change your expectations in yourself in a way where it's like, instead of using, I don't want to say that. Can you give me another way to say that? Sorry, I don't mean to. They're not giving me any other way, but it's language around self-harming, so I don't want to trigger anyone. But basically, they're saying like, don't. The point is not to stop hurting yourself with one tool just to pick up another tool and hurt yourself in another way. Elixir of life. I like that. Oh, look at these flowers matching right here. So this one I like to read from the booklet. So let's say, oh, right here, Elixir of Life. Healing, consolidation, reinvigoration, and truth. A woman is leaning towards a deep red rose. She faces the flower with her eyes closed, concentrating on the lush bloom. She is receiving the sweet scent of nature and the energy of life. Energy, so much energy. The wind rustles with her hair, whispering the truths of the universe into her ears. She can hear her own breath mingling in the wind. Sitting quietly in nature by a stream or in a garden can help still our wandering mind and heal a troubled heart. I want you to focus on wherever it is that you feel you are suppressing an aspect of yourself. I'm not here to tell you you must go out into the world and put it on display for everyone. No, that's not the point. The point is for you to find a way to express it in a way that you get to live it, that you get to feel it. Find a place where you are safe, where you are not exposed, where you can feel safe enough to just be. And then just find ways to express whatever it is that you've suppressed, even just if it is only within your own company. Because that is the most important company, first of all. But that is letting it live, whatever it is that you're pushing down. And whether that means that you're going to go out, go for a hike, go sit on a rock somewhere, go to a lake somewhere, go to an ocean somewhere, and sit there, and that if that means that you just cry, then just do that. Just go and cry and let all the negative emotions out. If that means you're gonna go yell and scream, go do that. If that means you're just gonna go and dance, go do that. If it means that you're going to go somewhere and just sit with yourself while fully expressing the gender that you truly are, then go do that. And do that so many times until it becomes absolutely natural for you to express that. Because it is a part of you and it wants to live. And it deserves to live. Every part of you deserves to be expressed and deserves to get airtime. And you, I think, even though it's something where you're very much like, you've probably suppressed it to a point where it almost scares you and it feels overwhelming to let it out. But I think once you start, I think you're going to enjoy it. You're going to really it's going to become something really special to you. Okay, that is where I believe you're being too hard on yourself. And I hope that this resonated. I hope that it helps. This got way longer than I wanted to be honest. But It's worth it. And so are you. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I hope I get to read for you again sometime. Until then, take care. Hi, Group 2. This is your reading if you chose this beautiful combination of greens with this green-tipped little feather. I also just love this design. I should not call it that. I don't know what else to call it, but pattern, that's a word. Mercury is retrograde. I've been stumbling over my words today, so have a little bit of patience with me. So we're going to set this off to the side, and we are going to pull some tarot cards. For Group 2, where are they being too... That was an awful shuffle. I'm being too hard on myself too, can you tell? Where is Group 2 being too hard on themselves? For Group 2. Are you kidding me? The Strength card just came out for Group 1 in the same position. Where's Group 2 being too hard on themselves? But context matters, so I will see. I'm sure this is going to be a very different expression of it. And give me one more before I start talking. And the Hermits. Ooh. Aw. Okay. I think that you have a strong expectation in yourself of managing any feelings of loneliness, and I think you create, when there are times where you do feel lonely, and not just alone, because those can be very different experiences, right? When there are times where you feel lonely, I think you may create scenarios in your mind as to why. I think you may create scenarios as to why you deserve to be lonely, which is not true. There are some pathways, and I say pathways because we create neurological pathways when we create like thought patterns like that. And our neurons will travel just whatever is, they just bump around our brains. I'm not a neurosurgeon, so do not take my word on that. But from what I understand, our neurons just kind of, when we think, they just like kind of bump around our brains, right? And they go along these pathways, and whatever pathways we are most likely to repeat, it becomes kind of like when you create a pathway on a patch of grass, when people take a shortcut, and after a while you start to see a little trail. And that's kind of how it works with our neural pathways, where the more often we recreate a thought pattern, the more likely those neurons are going to be like, oh, I'm just going to take this one. I'm just going to take this route. Did not see myself talking about neurons, but that's what I'm picking up on here, is that there are possibly, like in times of solitude, there is this very cyclical pattern of thoughts that takes you down a rabbit hole that is very dark and very lonely. And I'm almost getting the sense with this Nine of Swords and this Nine of Wands here, I'm seeing like an image of, in movies when somebody's in captivity and they like scratch or write the number of days that they've been in captivity. That's kind of the imagery that I'm seeing here. Like there's some kind of measurement that you take of like, why have I not figured this out? It's been this many days, it's been this many weeks, it's been this many years, or it's been this many failed attempts, it's been this many relationships, it's been this many times trying over. Let's pull some more cards. I like this Queen of Wands, but let's see where this is going. Okay, at the bottom of the deck is the King of Cups. So with the Queen of Wands, we have the Seven of Swords and the Knight of Swords. I'm wondering where you are holding yourself back, because there is something where you're holding yourself back. Like deliberately holding yourself back. There's something that you possibly wanted to go after and you self-sabotaged, and now you can't let go of the fact that you self-sabotaged. And it's like you're picking fights with yourself. Oh, like you might have really harsh arguments with yourself, meaning the voice in your mind might be really kind of really hard, like just very, you wouldn't talk to anyone else like that. You would not. You wouldn't talk to any person that you loved like that, and you wouldn't talk to even any person that you hated that way. For some reason, I'm picking up on this kind of, not that it started out with, but within, like when you're in company, you might be doing this through like self-deprecating humor. Like it might have started out as something that is like more innocent, but then you got used to that tone, and then it's like you kind of stuck with it. It almost feels like a character that just kind of bled into your brain. That's such a weird way of putting it, but that's what it feels like. Like you were, you know, when actors go into like method acting, and then there's like reports of them being like really kind of losing that boundary between their real life and when they should be acting, right? And that's kind of what it feels like. There was something where you were like really hard on yourself. And I think in the beginning you thought that addressing yourself with harshness is something that drives you, is something that motivates you, almost kind of like boot camp voice. But then that voice got so like, it moved in. Instead of just visiting, it moved in, and it didn't leave. And it became overpowering, and it overpowered your brain in a way that I really think in the beginning that voice probably motivated you in some aspect. But ultimately, it's really abrasive, and it's just very uncomfortable. And so at the bottom of the deck, we have the King of Cups, and In the previous reading, I was kind of looking at the bottom of the deck as like, where can we be nicer to ourselves? And I think this makes sense with the King of Cups, because the King of Cups is about emotional maturity. Emotional maturity in a way where you are reigning over your emotions, not in a way that suppresses them, but in a way that acknowledges them and trying to look for the right word. Because the only word I can find is raining, but I literally just used that. But it's in a way where it's like you manage them, right? But not manage in a way of like, okay, you sit down and be quiet, you sit down and be quiet, but managing in a way of mediating. That makes a lot more sense. You mediate your emotions of like, okay, you get to speak, all other emotions be quiet for a minute, or voices like, why do you feel that we have failed in this situation? Well, I feel we have failed because of this, this, and this. Okay, then we let the voice that's a little bit more optimistic speak. Why do you think that this failure does not define us? And then let that voice speak. This King of Cups is asking you to employ some sorry, words are difficult today. Employ some emotional distance. There's a word that is like on the tip of my tongue and I cannot get it. Objectivity. There we go. To employ some emotional objectivity, which still means that they all get addressed, but it is going to take active reigning. It takes you actually stepping into this power. You're very driven, and you need to use that drive into regulating your emotions, regulating them in a way where this voice does not get to speak all night long. And you don't want to suppress it completely. It is a valid expression of your feelings, but it's like they are holding the longest TED talk ever. Like, this is sword after sword after sword after sword. And ideally, especially when it is like, you're something that's keeping you up at night, it is going to take you actually moderating and being like, okay, thank you so much. That was an interesting take. However, we are now going to look at things from a different perspective. There also is a request here from Spirit to take a look at why are you doing this? Where did this pattern start? To seek within yourself, why are we not employing emotional objectivity? I mean, emotional objectivity itself, that word, those two words are really difficult to combine because emotions are a personal experience. But there is some, we have all these different parts within ourselves, within our psyche, where somebody needs to step up and become more objective. Somebody within your psyche, meaning I think your ego is probably doing this to you. Our ego is an important part of ours. It is a part that protects us. And I think that in some ways it wanted to protect you from failure. That it sounds weird, but a lot of times when we self-sabotage ourselves, my goodness, words today. When we self-sabotage, a lot of times it does come from a place of fear of failure. And so we'd rather be aware of how we are creating our own failure than experiencing failure through outside sources, because it makes us feel in control. Let's roll some dice. Oh yeah. We have the 12th house, very much this energy. We have the moon, and we have Leo. So I say this with love, but whenever you're in this mode, whenever you're like, your brain is going in circles and it's a really bad circle, it's a bit dramatic. It is. And I say this with love and no judgment, because trust me, I am a Scorpio through and through. I know dramatic emotions and dramatic emotional breakdowns, and sometimes it feels good, you know? Sometimes you have a dramatic break and it's like, ah, and it feels good because you're letting it out, okay? So there's nothing wrong with the drama of it. Absolutely not. However, what is wrong is when you do it so often that it keeps you stuck, and when you feel like you've lost a sense of control, and when you feel like it's become its own thing. So the 12th house is the house of, excuse me, let me take a sip of tea. The 12th house is a house of the things unseen. It holds a lot of very nefarious things. But one of those is our mental health, especially when our mental health isn't doing great. Opposite the 12th house, we have the 6th house. The 6th house is our daily task routines. It is health. Mental health in that aspect is like, okay, we're tackling it, we're taking care of it. 12th house is stowing things away under the bed to deal with another day. So the 12th house itself is a very dark place. And then the moon, emotions. Leo, ruled by the sun, those are two very opposite energies. And having Leo clash with the moon, again, it's a little bit of drama in the emotional realm, but it is dramatic because it wants to be acknowledged. It wants to be center stage. And so while you probably suppress it when you're around others, when you're alone, it's overwhelming. It becomes, especially because 12th house is also times when we spend alone. So when you are in front of people, you probably are like, oh, I have everything in control. Like I'm good. I don't need help. And then when you're alone and feeling lonely, it just kind of overwhelms you. It completely crushes you mentally. It's extremely overwhelming. Let's pull an archetype card. For group 2. Whoa! Only one turned over. So I'm taking that one. We have companion. Light attributes loyalty, tenacity, and unselfishness. Shadow attributes betrayal and misusing confidences, loss of personal identity. I've been reading these cards very much as, how does this relate to you? This is about the relationship between you and you, because that's what we're looking at, right? Where are you being too hard on yourself constitutes two versions of you. And so this companion card, first of all, I love that it's yellow, because we have the strength card here with yellow, and we have the 7 of swords here with yellow. And the Queen of Wands, of course, but this kind of connecting the two feels very much of, you are not being a good companion to yourself when you are alone. And again, when you are with people, it's probably quite easy to suppress these things, but when you are alone, it's like there's nobody to protect you. There's nobody to stand up for you, because you won't stand up for yourself, because you are not loyal to yourself. Oh, ouch. And because you have self-sabotaged yourself in the past for whatever reasons, possibly good reasons. You know, there's always layers to self-sabotage, but because of that, you don't trust yourself anymore. And because you don't trust yourself, it's like technically you should have within yourself one side that is like, oh, I am my biggest cheerleader, and one side that is like, oh, I'm my biggest critic, right? That is kind of, it's healthy. We all do it. And it's like you've actually turned your cheerleader onto the side of your critic, and now you just have two critics in your head. And so there's something where you're just like not a good companion to yourself, but you have the ability to change that with this King of Cups. You have the ability to bring back loyalty and lovingness, kindness, and companionship to yourself. Because this fierceness that you have a lot of it. This fierceness that you have, you just need to redirect it. You know, when, I have no idea why this is coming up, but I'm thinking of this scene in Mean Girls where they assemble all of the girls in order to address the issues around the burn book and Regina, what is it, Regina George? It's kind of like that, where it's like all of a sudden, like Regina George has been ruling unchecked, and part of that critic in your brain is Regina George, and she has been ruling unchecked, and every part of yourself has been like, oh, I guess we just gotta like go with that. And this is like the assembly of like, have you been personally victimized by the critic in your head? And then everybody raising their hand, and then you realize that there's power in numbers, right? And there's power in, wait, we can turn this around. Like, we have the power. And that's this fierceness that you have, where you can just, that fierceness that you have, you can just redirect it towards the critic, and you can decimate the critic. And now, do you want to completely destroy the critic in your mind? Not necessarily, because they can be productive, they can be helpful. But right now they are running a dictatorship in your mind, especially when you're alone. This card is also asking you to treat yourself, I mean, I already said that, treat yourself more of a companion. But like I said earlier, the way that you talk to yourself, you wouldn't treat your friend that way. You wouldn't talk to your friend that way. So you need to bring back, you need to actually treat the relationship with yourself as if it was a very broken relationship with a friend. Imagine you have a friend and you've had a falling out and you really want to work on things and you really want to make it up to them. That's how you need to treat yourself. You can't just decide from one day to the next, like, okay, and now I'm going to be nice to myself. Like, no, you need to really address, and I recommend like sitting down, writing yourself an apology letter, you know, like, again, that sounds a little bit dramatic, but that's what we're dealing with here, right? Really addressing the things that you haven't addressed, because you can't just brush them over. You need to, there needs to be some kind of clearing of like, okay, I deserve to acknowledge where I've been unkind to myself. And then what I was going to say is, the other thing is that I think there might be some benefit in sharing some of this emotional distress that you do cause yourself, sharing it with others, because sometimes the things that we say to ourselves, we get away with saying the meanest things to ourselves because we know nobody else is going to ever hear them. Imagine having your best friend next to you while you say the meanest things that you think to yourself out loud. Your friend would start beating you up in the nice way. They would be like, what the heck? No, why are you saying that? Why would you even think that, right? And so there is this idea of maybe sharing a little bit, you know, whether that is in a more professional setting with a therapist. Because I'm not here to tell you that, oh, you can fix all your issues completely by yourself. No, that's not going to be the case for everyone. For some people, this is a long-standing pattern, and this is something that needs to be addressed in a behavioral changing way because of what I was talking about earlier with the neurons and the neural pathways. It is extremely difficult to make ourselves create new neural pathways. It takes practice and it takes constant awareness of when you're actually following back on those old pathways. And what you need to do is create new pathways so you don't get tempted by those old ones. It is very difficult work. My goodness, I've been rambling on. Let me pull some oracle cards. This one. Be here now. Be here now is very much asking you to get grounded. Whenever you experience these spiraling moments when you're alone and it starts, because trust me, you will get to a point where you can tell, oh, it's coming, and you probably already do know that point. But when that starts, there is a lot that can be done in terms of regulating your nervous system. So you might want to do some research into that. But regulating just your response, because it's totally fine. If that starts coming on, if something starts bubbling up, it's totally fine. Feel it and then address it. Don't react to it, but respond to it in a way where you take control, where you don't let that emotional spiral control you, but you take control of the moment in focusing on your nervous system, focusing on your body, grounding yourself, taking deep breaths, like all the stuff that people tell you where it's like, oh, that's so annoying, but it's true. There are ways to ground yourself in your body so that your mind doesn't take over and create scenarios, because that's what happens. We start getting into our head so much that our brain starts creating stuff and our body starts reacting to it, because then when we are like creating these scenarios, our body is like, oh, we are stressed, we should probably react, and then it just spirals on from there. And so if you actually pay attention when it starts and then acknowledge it, let yourself feel it for a little while, but then find a way to snap out of it and be like, okay, I need to ground myself. I need to acknowledge that in this present moment, I am not facing danger. I am not facing judgment by anyone other than myself, and bring the attention to your body. Let's take a look at your card here. I follow my inner guidance, and I love that there's her third eye is like surrounded by yellow, and we were talking about yellow. I follow my inner guidance. This is your advice card, so this is asking you to really like take the rein back. And I know this is kind of difficult to understand because we're talking about you versus you, but there is still an aspect of like it's basically the ego, id, and the superego. There has to be someone in charge. There has to be someone that says, okay, and now it's enough. And now, like, it has a lot to do with self-parenting, but there has to be someone within you that says, now we focus on this, now we focus on that, so that we don't get stuck in that spiral. I hope that makes sense. And so this advice card is asking you to trust in that, and especially because I'm just noticing that her earring kind of looks like a Libra, which is very much about bringing peace to yourself. Pay attention when those thoughts come up. Pay attention. Why did you start spiraling? And where are you feeling this? Where is this feeling coming from? Because it's not going to be your intuition. It's always going to be something that has triggered your ego. It's not going to be your intuition. Your intuition is not going to make you freak out. And so this is really asking you to kind of tap into your intuition more and let that guide you. Let's pull one of these. This one. Pioneer. Oh, I love this because this is totally connecting to creating a new neural pathway. You're pioneering, you're creating a new path. Ride the energy of your own unique spirit, Pioneer. This is very much like, yes, feel your feelings, experience it. You're allowed to feel the whole spectrum of your experience, but you need to pioneer, you need to create the pathway that is a middle ground, not completely your own cheerleader, not completely your own critic. Although I think for a little while you could probably veer off into just being your cheerleader, because you've got some making up to do with yourself. Now, so I'm going to pull one last oracle card, but overall, where are you being too hard on yourself? Basically everywhere. But really, what I'm trying to say is you're being too hard on yourself when it comes to you being alone and taking stock of possibly the past. And you know what? The past is done. It's done. If you self-sabotaged last year, it's done. All you can do now is move forward. If you self-sabotaged yesterday, it's done. If you self-sabotaged 2 hours ago, it's done. It's done. Acknowledge it and then see how to move forward. But blaming yourself and being hard on yourself and arguing with yourself over the same thing that you cannot change because it's done, what's the point in that? It's much more productive to be like, okay, we've learned. We understand now that that was not the outcome we wanted. Let's figure out together, you and yourself, let's figure out together how we can move on from this in a productive way. Flower Spirit. I'm going to read this one from the book. Oh, I love it already. Flower Spirit, friendship, soul, tenderness, joy. This card shows the tender and sensitive flower fairy, the soul of each plant. She listens with all her heart to her friends and provides a soothing caress when their edges get prickly. By enjoying life and keeping the playfulness in her heart, she is a source of inspiration and joy. Her childlike vision helps her see the good in all things, especially herself. You are being asked to be your own best friend, your biggest supporter. You have been slacking on that front. You need to, you are literally being too hard on yourself. You need to step up and make amends with yourself. Repair that friendship with yourself. It is so, so vital. And as soon as you address that, you are very driven, you are very energetic, like you're going to just address that relationship within yourself and it's going to move you forward so much. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope that this was helpful. I hope it resonated, and I do hope I get to read for you again sometime. Until then, take care. Hi, Group 3. If you chose this cutie, then this is your reading. We're going to set the feather down right up here, this over here, and this over here. So we're going to get right into it and start pulling tarot cards. Again, we are taking a look at where are you being too hard on yourself. For group 3, where are you being too hard on yourself? We have the moon. We're going to get some more context. Right away, though, with this moon card, I'm feeling that you might be kind of hard on your instincts. There's something where you feel instinctively, when you find yourself in situations where you feel instinctively called to react or respond in a certain way, you kind of temper that. You kind of like are like, no, like you, there's some kind of, there's definitely like a vibe of you not trusting your intuition and possibly not fully trusting spirit. And it's funny because these are both beautiful cards, but there's just like a slight layer of mistrust here. And it's like you want to, it feels very much like I want to believe. Like you might even have like clicked on this video being like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. There's something about like, oh, I want to believe that things are being handled for me, or I want to trust when I receive intuitive hits on something, but possibly like really desiring like proof. Both of these energies are very ethereal, and we're asking, where are you being too hard on yourself? Meaning you might feel more secure and more assured whenever you deal with the more material energies. Yeah, for sure. With this 9 of coins. You're like, oh my goodness, the Justice card at the bottom of the deck. I don't mean to laugh, but for some reason this is like making me giggly because it's very much like, bring me the proof. I don't know why there was an accent with that either. Look at the way she's looking away from him too. It's just like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Oh my goodness. And it's funny because I'm asking, where are you being too hard on yourself, right? So this isn't even because I'm feeling like this is you being sort of judgmental when it comes to the metaphysical, and yet that we're asking about yourself. So this is obviously something that is very strong within you. Like you probably receive very strong intuitive hits. You probably have a very strong skill when it comes to energy manipulation, things like that. And yet you don't acknowledge that. You don't see it as that because you probably just think like, I just work hard. I just do stuff well. And it's like, you don't even recognize how much you energetically manipulate your, and I mean manipulate in a good way. You know, why is this making me laugh? It's just so ironic. It's so ironic because I feel like you are like, I'll believe it when I see it. But at the same time, you're the one creating it. You're the Oh my god, why is this so funny? This energy is just very, it's paradoxical. Because it's so stern on this side, and it's like, it's just very like, I don't know how I feel about that, but at the same time, you're creating so much. What can I even compare this to? I'm getting this image of you being at a beach. This is so random. I don't know where this is going. I have to follow it. You're at a beach and you have a little shovel and you're shoveling, and every time you get a shovelful, you throw it over your shoulder. And you're digging and digging because you're looking for proof. And somehow you're not realizing that because you're digging for proof of some kind of creation. And at the same time, you're not realizing that each shovel you throw behind your back just adds to this mountain that turns into like a sandcastle behind you miraculously. And you're just like, well, I don't see it. I don't know what the fuss is about. And it's like, you just single-handedly created a huge sandcastle behind you. And it's incredibly impressive. And you're just like not looking at it. You're just not seeing it. Because you're like, I don't see any proof. And it's like, lady, turn around. I don't know why it's so funny to me. And again, we're talking about, where are you being too hard on yourself? You're being hard on yourself in not recognizing some aspect of yourself where you're actually very skilled. And for some reason, I think you just take that for granted about yourself, and you don't realize that other people don't have that skill. Other people don't have the ability to do that. And your focus is on the material, though. Your focus is very much on the like, well, that's not something special. Anyone can do that. And it's like, no, people wish they could. People wish they had that kind of skill. And for you, it's like, it's not enough. And for you, it feels like it's not enough. So you're like, oh, I want something. And really, from my perspective, it's like, you don't want something, you want more. You already have a lot. You have a lot. But you're like, I want more. And Spirit is saying, like, you need to appreciate what you have. But it's interesting because, again, Spirit keeps refocusing me towards, we're looking at, where are you being too hard on yourself? And you're being too hard on yourself in a way where you're not acknowledging your entire being. You're acknowledging part of you, and you think, I need more, because that's not enough. But there's a whole aspect to you that you're not fully acknowledging. And that's not to say that you shouldn't strive for more, because yeah, you're very, I think you have very strong manifestation skills. But you also need to bring awareness to your foundation, to what you even have, so that you can build upon that in the most effective way, right? So you can use all of your tools. That's the thing. It's like you have a toolbox. And you don't realize that toolbox is not everything that you have. It's just the things that you took with you. But in reality, you have a whole garage full of like a workbench and like crazy expensive tools. Again, I don't know why it's so funny to me. And the Justice card came out again. Really driving that point home. And then we have the Ten of Swords at the bottom of the deck. That is interesting because I have been reading the bottom of the deck as this is, where are you being too hard on yourself? And this is, where or how can you be kinder to yourself? This is fascinating. With the Ten of Swords, okay, let me focus on this first, and then I'll tell you what I think that is. But we have the Five of Swords for the Moon. We have the Knight of Wands for Temperance, and then we have Justice with the Nine of Coins. I think I've already addressed Justice, but let's take a look at this Five of Swords. Along with the Moon card, this is having picked up something, quite literally, right? But having picked up something, but not acknowledging it. You have picked up some kind of skill when it comes to your subconscious, when it comes to your intuition, because you had to. And so that's why you don't fully acknowledge it, because you're just like, that doesn't everyone have that? Like, doesn't everyone, like, what? We all went through some kind of trauma, right? We all, and it's just like this, your attitude is just very like, duh, like, doesn't everyone? And it's like, yes, technically we all experience some forms of trauma and hardship, but not everyone comes away from that having learned lessons. Look at this situation where this guy is like, well, guess the battle's over. I'm just going to take this sword and this sword. That is knowledge. This person is leaving this battle being like, well, at least I have this insight, at least I have this awareness, at least I have this understanding of what went wrong. This person is just completely in their feelings. This person is kind of worried about that person, so they're not even paying attention to these swords, right? And you're just kind of like, well, that's just how the cookie crumbles. I'm just going to take this, and I'll see you later, bye. I think you are hilarious. And then we have the Knight of Wands. This is strong manifestation energy, that you are so good at manipulating energies that probably expresses itself in a very mundane way in your everyday life, where you get your way. If you want something, it just kind of happens. If you're in a group and there's like a specific restaurant that you kind of want to go to, you don't even really have to. You just kind of plant the seed, and then all of a sudden everyone wants what you want, which that's nice, but you don't realize that that is actually you actively manipulating energy. Again, manipulating in a not necessarily negative way, but can be in a negative way. There can be a negative expression to that, but it seems like you get your way and you're used to it. And that's the thing, you're used to it because you've had this skill set from a very young age, probably. You're very used to this. And there are people that do not have this. There are people that go through life not having this kind of skill and still trying to work their way up to this Nine of Pentacles. And you are so used to it that you take it for granted. And when it comes to being too hard on yourself, it's like, I don't see the there's something where it's like you just don't see the value. You don't appreciate what you have. It's like having a piece of jewelry and not being aware that the gemstones are legitimate gemstones. You think it's just costume jewelry. And you're like, oh, this whole thing, I've had this forever. And if you take it to an appraiser, someone like me, and I look at this and I'm like, you got some grade A gemstones in your energy. Like, I don't even know if grade A makes sense with that, but you get what I mean. So you hold yourself to a standard that is very material. And I don't mean by that you are materialistic or anything. It doesn't necessarily, it can be for some of you, but it doesn't have to mean that, oh, you need to have money to feel accomplished. That's one expression of it, but it doesn't have to mean that. It can also just mean that You need to feel secure in a way that that you can see, that you can touch, that you can feel, and not just that you can sense. There's something where it's like you need to have material security around you in order to feel accomplished, in order to feel that you've actually done something, that you've been productive. If you don't see it materialized, then you don't see it at all. And it's funny because it's like, well, yeah, none of us really see it. But there's something where it's like you... And because you're like a very strong manifester, I think that's why Spirit is telling us about this right now. Because it's like, if you were to just tap into the fact that you don't have to see it to believe it, then you would like really, really optimize your usage of this skill in a way that elevates your manifestation game completely. So going to this Ten of Swords, how is this, how does this relate to how to be kinder to yourself? I think this is kind of like killing, this is an ego death. How to be kinder to yourself, because there is some kind of measurement that is happening where you're like, well, if it doesn't measure up to this, then obviously it can't be real, which comes from a place of thinking you know what is real and what is not. There is an ask here for you to accept that are things that are very real, that cannot be explained, that cannot be measured. And that you actually are very skilled at some of those things. This is very much giving me like conditioning vibes, like you've been conditioned, because obviously this is something that you're naturally skilled at, but also it's kind of like it was in your nature, but you've also been nurtured in a way to overcompensate for some kind of situations where you had to be very aware when it comes to your emotions, other people's emotions, and that really kind of fine-tuned your intuition. And you probably had to navigate very tricky situations. So these are skills that were very much fine-tuned by external things, which is why you probably are really good at explaining them away. But there is an aspect to you where it's like you need to experience, in order to be kinder to yourself and to become more aware of your entire skill set and be less harsh on yourself, because there's this aspect of you that cannot be measured that is very powerful. You need to experience an ego death that acknowledges that you cannot know everything, that you cannot understand everything, and that you cannot, that none of us can. That doesn't make you less than anyone, but that none of us, no human being has the capacity to understand everything. Oh, there's a cute little bird on the fence outside, and I wish I could tell you what kind of bird it is, but it's very small, and it has a yellow chest, and it is looking right at me. I almost want to say it's a finch. These things never happen by coincidence, and he is staring right at me. So I'm going to look up a finch, just to make sure. I do think it could be a finch, but I'm not seeing anything that looks exactly like it. But size-wise, it definitely matches. I'm sorry. Whenever, like, sometimes I wish I could control it. Sometimes I could be like, just don't look it up. But whenever I'm being pushed like this, I can't control it. That's because it's a message for someone. So, um, it's a yellow-breasted chat. I have no clue. Can you see this? This is what it looks like. That's totally what it looks like. A yellow-breasted chat. So if you feel called to look it up, he is still just sitting there, just hanging out. And this is very much connecting to this Nine of Pentacles for me, visually. He's so cute. He's just like a stout little guy, bouncing back and forth. I don't know why he's staring in here, but he is adorable. I'm trying to see if any messages come up. I am getting, and this is a message that I get quite frequently, especially when it comes to spirituality, how birds instinctively know to migrate, how birds instinctively know to create little nests, which is an animal instinct, right? And yet there's something very magical about it. I don't think I'm not a bird expert, obviously, as you can tell, but I don't think how did I not make that connection? She's literally holding this bird with a yellow chest. Oh my god, how did it take me that long to see that? I mean, to recognize that. But I don't know that we've actually figured out how bird migration, like, how do the birds know? I don't know. Oh my god, your energy is so silly. And also, I think you have a need to know. That's why I had to Google this right now. I was like, I need to know. You have this need to figure it out. Okay. Anyways, I've been talking way too long. Let's start. Oh, Astro Dice. Let's do the Astro Dice first. He's still sitting there. He's just hanging out. So we have the 5th house. We have the moon, of course, and then we have Aquarius. I like this. The 5th house is the house of creation. You are so a manifester. We have the moon. You are able to you are able to create from your emotions. Aquarius, I think, is very much this idea of wanting to figure something out. It's very much like wanting to understand and also being kind of uncomfortable with this emotional aspect of it. It's like, I don't want to hold on to the emotions, I just would rather understand them. And that's why you were so good at learning this skill. But there is, because Aquarius is the water bearer, so the water bearer doesn't hold on to the emotions. You just process them and let it go, right? Good for you. But because of that, you're not addressing how much you've actually learned to process. Like, it's, especially I'm looking at the water going back and forth here on the Temperance card. Like, there's just something of, because you don't hold on to it, you don't recognize how much has flown through you and how much you have created through it. I'm almost getting the sense of like a water mill, how water mills use the power of water to turn the wheel and to mill or create energy, right? And yet you don't acknowledge, it's like you have a water mill, but you don't fully appreciate the water. Something around there. Let's pull some oracle cards. We're going to get a archetype card first. Again, the fifth house is what we create, and it's also like where we shine. It is the house of children. It is the house of joy. It is the house of like artistic creations. And there's something, again, where it's just like something has come to you very natural, and because of that, you just don't, you're just like this? Like, yeah, duh. We have guide. I love this. Light attribute represents the nature of the divine in life and yourself, and that's exactly the issue. You don't recognize the divine within yourself because you're like constantly seeking for proof. So you don't just trust the divine within yourself. Shadow attribute places financial gain and control over imparting spiritual insight. So this doesn't necessarily mean that, I don't know why I felt the need to stop myself, but I was going to say this doesn't necessarily mean that you are using your powers for money, but I mean, that could be part of it. It could be that you are such a strong manifester that, you know, creating resources comes naturally to you, and so you don't necessarily recognize when you're actually taking advantage of something, someone, or even yourself for a material purpose. And so bringing some awareness to that, being kinder to your spiritual self, will really kind of balance that out. And I love that we have guide, because that's the thing. I think there is some kind of aspect to you where you may have not ever felt called to any kind of religion. You may question organized religion. You may question spirituality, and you kind of seek to find proof, and you seek to find anything to disprove, because that would actually make you feel more comfortable with the knowledge of like understanding. It's like when you go to see a magician, instead of like just enjoying the show for the drama of it, you're sitting there trying to figure out, okay, how did he do this? How did they do that? How did they make that happen? Really trying to figure out like, how is it done though? And so I think that you are in a position where you are spiritually actually quite powerful. Sometimes some of us go through a long period of skepticism because it best prepares us to learn that we're really never going to know an answer. And so what I'm feeling with this guide card is that you actually may not have ever been fully connected to a specific guide because you are ahead of a lot of spiritual guides. Technically, you just don't acknowledge it because you don't trust it. You need proof. And so you actually are very well equipped to be a spiritual guide, not in spite of, but because of your lack of trust in the past. Which, if you're watching this now, I think there's obviously a transition happening for you. Let's take a look at next oracle card, and then we'll pull your advice card, or turn over your advice card. That came out immediately. Look at that, nourish. I love this because I feel like this is about nourishing your spiritual side, because you know what? Nourishing, there's something that is, especially in this imagery of a mother nourishing her child, and look at this little fox, very much about spirituality, but there's something in this imagery that is like, it's about something that cannot be compared to materialistic gain. There's something nourishing where it's like, this isn't necessarily so much about the milk, but it is about the bond, right? It is about the feeling. It is about the oxytocin that's being released in this exchange. It is about the connection between mother and child, and a mother feeding her child with her own resources. And that's not to say that when babies receive formula or anything like that, that there's less of nourishment, because they're still receiving their nutrients, and it's more so about the act of feeding them, right? That's kind of what I'm trying to say. Like, it's about the bond that takes place when a person in power takes care and loves and takes care of a vulnerable child. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing here, is like, it's about nourishing your relationship with your spiritual self, not in necessarily a material way, but in a way where you just strengthen that bond between you and your intuitive and your higher self. Ultimately, that's kind of what I'm feeling, is that you're being really hard on your higher self, on your intuitive self, on your spiritual self, because you're like, I will not take you into consideration until you deliver me proof, until I am completely sure that I can trust you. And meanwhile, you're so powerful that you've constantly, over and over and over, created proof. You've created, if not have, you are well on your way to creating a life that is proof. It is proof. Everything around you is proof. And you're still kind of like, no. Send me a car with a license plate that has 777 on it. Otherwise, I won't believe it. And it's like, what? That is like the most smallest menial thing. But here, sure. And then it comes and you're like, no, that was too easy. It's like you keep making stuff happen, and you're not acknowledging that it's like you are making that happen. It's not, it's you against you here. Let's take a look. I communicate with compassion. And this is your advice card. I communicate with compassion. I want you to communicate with your higher self, with your spiritual self, with your intuition, in a way where you spend time listening. Because I communicate with compassion means that you have to put yourself in a position to receive. Because I communicate is, yeah, I mean, ultimately you'd want to listen, but this can very much be like I speak. With compassion, you cannot speak with compassion without first having to pay attention to what you're receiving, so that you can react and respond in a way that is appropriate. There's a beaming light in her chest area, heart chakra. There is an ask for you to listen. and listen without judgment, listen without measuring, and just trusting. Let's get one of these. The tide has come, act now. We are but glistening bursts of foam, swaying on the majestic waves of time. The time has come, act now. I want you to pay attention to the fact that she has 4 eyes. And then we have the triangle, like the Holy Trinity. And a blooming flower and lots of water here. The time has come, act now. I think there might be an ask for you to step into your power fully. And you cannot step into your, I think you're already very much in a position of power, but you cannot fully step into your potential until you've integrated this aspect of yourself. And that time has come, obviously. Otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here watching a tarot card reading, right? You've already been cracked open to some degree. And now there is an ask for you to actually engage with that part of yourself and not just get confirmation from other people like me, but engage with communication with your spirit self. Whoa. Can you hear me? Quite literally what I just said. Your spirit self is just like waiting. Your intuition is like, oh my God, how many more signs can I send them before they start listening to me? Like, we've built this whole life together and you will not acknowledge me. What the heck? They've had it. And I don't necessarily mean spirit. I mean your spirit self. I mean the spiritual aspect of you. Can you hear me? It's about communication, quite honestly. And it says, a woman floats in a seashell on the big sea. She looks to the horizon as if she is waiting for somebody. You. She is holding a trumpet in her hand, ready to blow it when the time comes. The ocean symbolizes her feelings that you probably didn't want to deal with. Vast and seemingly unknowable, absolutely unknowable, for sure. It surrounds her in an endless arc. She looks lonely and deserted, but she has a way of connecting, a tool for turning passive silence into supportive communication. She just needs to raise her trumpet and call for help. Your higher self, this triangle, your higher self is just waiting to communicate with you, to talk to you. You've been benefiting from your higher self. You've been benefiting from your intuitive powers, your manifesting powers. You've been benefiting, but you're not reciprocating. And and it's been very interesting doing these readings because, again, I'm asking, where are you being too hard on yourself? And in all of these readings, I feel like I'm mediating between just 2 aspects of you and you. And so if it sounds like I'm being harsh and telling you, like, this is what you're doing wrong, that's only because I'm standing up for another part of you. So where are you being too hard on yourself? You're being too hard on the intuitive, on the sensitive, on the emotional part of yourself. And it's time to open up a dialogue between the practical side of you and the intuitive side of you so that you can both expand in a beautiful way together. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I also just want to point out right quick that this blue from this feather beautifully connects to this blue on this guide. And actually for group 1, I was talking about how this feather is like one of the protective layer feathers, and this one is kind of like a little bit of both. It's like higher up on the bird's neck, and it protects. But then there's also an aspect that is very flamboyant and very, sorry, I just realized we're not in focus, that is very much for you, this layer of protection, and then the top is intuition. Intuition peeking through. So you need to address that you are both of these. You are both aspects. You are intuitive and emotional in nature, as well as constructive, pragmatic, and productive. Okay? I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope that this was interesting, that it resonated, and I do hope I get to read for you again sometime. Until then, take care.